The Chakrabarti.
Tonight at 10, 5 pledges from the Prime Minister at the start of the new year on which he wants the country to judge his premiership. In a keynote speech, Rishi Sunak focused on the NHS, cutting inflation and economic growth. But Labour mocked his vision, asking, is that it?
The cost of living, too high. Waiting times in the NHS, too long. Illegal migration, far too much.
The problems that we see today, whether it's in the NHS or in our schools or in our communities where it comes to crime, come down to a failure over those last 13 years. So it's on the Prime Minister.
We'll be looking at the detail and asking if the pledges can be delivered. And our other main story tonight. A special report from Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine, the site of fierce fighting from which almost all the city's residents have fled.
We're walking all over shards of glass. Pretty much every second you hear the sound of artillery fire. You can tell every minute that this is a city that is being intensely fought over.
Sir, you do not have the votes, and it's time to withdraw.
Chaos in the US Congress as Republican rebels block the election of a new speaker for a 6th time. And the prolific novelist Faye Weldon, who wrote more than 30 books, has died at the age of 91.
On BBC London, the work-from-home revolution, how the pandemic has reshaped the working week. And more train strikes tomorrow. We'll have all the details.
Good evening. In a keynote New Year's speech, Rishi Sunak has set out 5 pledges to voters, including on the NHS, the cost of living and the economy, in a bid to establish a fresh vision for his government. The Prime Minister promised to halve inflation, to grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop illegal channel crossings. Among the many challenges facing the country is the huge pressure on the NHS, and Mr Sunak said that reforms were coming and that cutting waiting times was one of his priorities. But Labour called him the do-nothing Prime Minister and said the country was entitled to ask, is that it? Our political editor Chris Mason reports.
We've had thousands and thousands of pounds of business lost, spread over many, many weeks, all year.
This is the first time I've actually had to go and ask for help. I just can't do it at the minute.
I had to take him out in the rain into the hospital to have the x-ray and then bring him back into the ambulance. The system seems completely broken.
It might be a new year, but last year's problems confront us seemingly everywhere. The Prime Minister claims he gets it.
New Year should be a time of optimism and excitement. Yet I know many of you look ahead to 2023 with apprehension. I want you to know that as your Prime Minister, I will work night and day to change that, and quickly.
The health service this winter confronts immense pressures. Can any of us be confident it'll be there for us, our families, if we suddenly need it?
People are understandably anxious when they see ambulances queuing outside hospitals. You should know we're taking urgent action, increasing bed capacity by 7,000 more hospital beds and more people cared at home. Providing new funding to discharge people into social care in the community, freeing up beds.
This was pointedly a speech that tried to look beyond the array of what many see as crises happening now, to set out what Rishi Sunak is about and hopes to achieve.
5 promises. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats. Those are the people's priorities. They are your government's priorities, and we will either have achieved them or not.
From migrant crossings to the economy, Rishi Sunak tried to set targets he can be measured against. He also tried to tell us a bit about what drives him: education, an aspiration all young people in England study maths in some form until they're 18. His anger at antisocial behaviour, albeit without new specific ideas to tackle it. And then there was this.
But family is something politicians struggle to talk about, because you can all too readily be pilloried for being out of touch. But whatever your family looks like, it doesn't matter. as long as the common bond is love.
The health service is under extraordinary pressure right now, and some people watching this afternoon might say, is that it? How soon will things improve in the NHS this winter?
What I want the country to know is this is an absolute priority for me. I made 5 promises today, and making sure that people can get the care that they need as quickly as they need it is right there as one of those priorities. The country should hold me to account for delivering it, and I'm confident that we will.
You'll notice there was no commitment there to a time frame for things improving in the NHS this winter. Labour claim the Prime Minister is out of touch.
The Conservatives have been in charge now for 13 years. That's a very long time to make change in our country. And the problems that we see today, whether it's in the NHS or in our schools or in our communities where it comes to crime, come down to a failure over those last 13 years.
The Prime Minister returned to Downing Street, his stall set out. Tomorrow it'll be Keir Starmer's turn to offer Labour's alternative vision. Chris Mason, BBC News in East London.
As we heard, the Prime Minister has said that NHS waiting lists were too long and promised that they would fall, with people getting the care they need more quickly. Well, our health editor Hugh Pym is here with me. How realistic is this pledge, Hugh?
Well, Rita, he set himself a stretching target, but he wants to be judged by it. Last year, ministers predicted that the overall waiting list in England, currently 7.2 million, would carry on going up right through to the early months of 2024 before beginning to turn. But arguably, things have become more difficult since that prediction. There are more COVID patients in hospital than anticipated. Flu's had a serious impact this winter, and there have been strikes with more to come. All factors which have limited the number of operations which can be carried out. So it's possible that the trend, the turning of it, may be delayed beyond the spring of next year. And of course, his target refers to during this Parliament, which is the end of 2024. So the figures will be watched very closely in the run-up to that. In terms of the measures he set out to support the NHS, one of them is the 7,000 extra beds. That actually was first unveiled by the NHS last August. He also talked of this fund to support moving patients out of hospitals back into the community. That was announced in September, but so far not all the money has been made available. And some might say, whatever the measures announced, look at the reality right now with overcrowded A&E units and very long waits for ambulances.
Hugh, thank you very much. Let's speak now to Chris Mason, our political editor, who joins us from Westminster. Quite a lot of promises from the Prime Minister today, Chris. How deliverable are they?
Yeah, lots of promises, Rita, and lots of big picture thoughts from the Prime Minister, which was quite striking given the challenges that Hugh was just talking about there, which we face here and now. And I think in reality what we had really from Rishi Sunak today was a kind of conference speech, party conference speech, that he never got the chance to deliver because he was cast off into temporary political oblivion, having lost the race to become Prime Minister, only to be reincarnated politically and become Prime Minister a few months later. And so he's almost having to do things in reverse and set out his stall to the country, what he stands for, having already been in the job for a couple of months. As far as those promises are concerned, some of them look eminently deliverable, some look a little vague. Others, like the one on the economy, show just how difficult the situation at the moment is. So he hopes the economy might grow by the end of this year. Well, even if that does happen and the promise is met, that's still months and months and months of recession between now and then. Here is a Prime Minister in a hurry because he has to deliver and deliver pretty quickly with an election inside 2 years. Tomorrow, the alternative proposition put forward by the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, as both men try to grapple with being seen to be the kind of credible managers of a pretty bleak era.
Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there. Well, a number of business groups have met the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, to discuss what government support they'll get with energy bills after March, when the current support scheme expires. It's understood that help will continue until next year, but at a significantly lower rate. There is some good news for households, though, as the recent warmer weather has led to predictions that domestic bills will rise, but by less than previously thought. Our business editor, Simon Jack, can tell us more. Simon.
Thank you, Rita. Yes, just as households have seen their energy bills subsidised during this energy crisis, Non-domestic users, that's businesses, local authorities, charities, etc., have also had government support with their bills. Now, the budget watchdog estimates that support will end up costing £18.4 billion by the end of March. Now, what we do know is that support for business will be significantly lower from April. Today, the Chancellor said no government can permanently shield businesses from this kind of energy price shock and said the current level of support is unsustainably expensive. Now, it just so happens that the cost of subsidising business should go down anyway, because energy is much cheaper now than at the height of the energy crisis. You can see just here how far wholesale prices have fallen in recent weeks and months. Now, what we don't know is exactly where prices for businesses will be fixed, whether really heavy energy-using industries will get more support than others. There's more detail to come on that next week. But in those falling prices is perhaps a crumb of comfort for domestic bills. Under the government's current energy price guarantee, a typical household will pay £2,500 a year until March, minus £400 of a universal discount. Now, that is meant to rise to £3,000 after that, but latest estimates from leading analysts suggest a typical bill may only rise to £2,800 in the autumn of this year. Now, it's still 3 times higher than its long-term average, but less than expected. And if true, it means it would cost the government a lot less, as it wouldn't have to pay the subsidies to keep it down at £3,000. But bottom line, business costs will rise, household incomes are set to fall, which is a recipe for a very challenging environment for consumers, businesses and the economy as a whole in 2023. Rita.
So, Simon, we've heard already about how deliverable the Prime Minister's broad promises are, but what about the specific promises on the economy?
So 3 laudable aims: bring inflation down, bring debt down and get growth going up. And how deliverable they are is sort of connected to how ambitious they are. So on the target to bring halve inflation in the next year, well, the Bank of England and the OBR, the Budget Watchdog, thinks that will happen anyway, all of its own, just on current forecasts, no policy intervention. On bringing the debt down, again, that's a current estimate which will happen in 2027 to 2028, so that's well past the next election. Now, growing the economy from when? From here? Probably not, because we're expecting to see the economy shrink in the next year. Does he mean get the economy growing at the end of next year after we've had the recession? Yes, that's perfectly possible. So deliverable, yes. How ambitious? Arguable.
Simon, thank you very much. And you can get more analysis of the Prime Minister's pledges today by heading to BBC News online. That's, of course, bbc.co.uk/news, and also by using the BBC News app. For months now, the city of Bakhmut has been the epicentre of the war in Ukraine. The battle there has been one of the most brutal of the conflict, with high numbers of casualties on both sides. Almost all of the city's 70,000 occupants have fled. Russia is working hard to capture Bakhmut in the hope that it could lead to the fall of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk as well, the 2 most important cities in the Donbass region still under Ukrainian control. But Ukrainian forces are holding firm. Our correspondent Yogita Limai has been on the front line in Bakhmut and has sent this report.
This is what the merciless bombardment of a city looks like. And how it sounds. Once a quiet place known for sparkling wine, Bakhmut is now a byword for war and Ukraine's resistance. Russia is using all its might to try and take this city. We drove past abandoned buildings. 90% of the people have fled. This is what you can see everywhere in Bakhmut. Destruction. On the other side of the road, you can see apartment blocks that are completely destroyed. We're walking all over shards of glass. Pretty much every second you hear the sound of artillery fire. You can tell every minute that this is a city that is being intensely fought over. And over the past few months of fierce battle, even though it's at an important road intersection, it is the symbolic importance of this fight that has become greater than its strategic location. Bakhmut is the home Anatoly has known all his life. We see him barely react
when a shell lands a few hundred meters away. He's come to an aid centre, a lifeline for those still here. Why don't you leave? We asked him.
I have nowhere to go. I am alone. Who would want to take an 86-year-old? Here at least sometimes, when the soldiers throw away food or soup, I find it and eat it. And I get free bread. In my whole life, I've never seen anything like this.
Tetiana Sherbak used to be a midwife before the war. Now she's a volunteer.
I stay because I'm needed here. Of course I'm scared. I've been caught in shelling 3 times. I suffered a concussion. But what use will I be hiding in a basement? People stay for different reasons.
The explosions don't stop, but no one flinches. It's as if they've become numb. Running from bombs every day. Repeated trauma without an end. Olha Tupikova told us she and her daughter live like mice, running out quickly to get bread. Walking to this centre for a bit of food is a risk they take to survive. Outside we met Alexei Reva, the mayor of Bakhmut. We can't show his location. It is my job, my life, my fate to stay here. I won't leave the people, and I trust that Ukraine's military won't allow my city to fall, he said. We went to see Ukrainian defense, taken to a location we can't disclose. Underground to one of their command centers in the city. The heart of the military operation. Few journalists have been here. This is a live feed from drones beyond the eastern edge of Bakhmut, where Russian forces are stationed. The men here are trying to locate the target for an assault team that's just gone out. Commander Skala, as he wants to be called, told us this is the toughest battle he's ever fought.
We haven't seen enemy troops like this before. Their soldiers openly advance under fire, even if they're littering the ground with their bodies, even if only 20 are left of their 60 men. It is very difficult to hold against such an invasion. A few weeks ago, we had to withdraw from the eastern approaches to the city to save our soldiers.
They showed us this video, the east of the city on New Year's morning under Russian attack. In the fields outside Bakhmut, we see the daily grind to keep a hold on it. The winter makes it harder to camouflage guns and men. We watch them fire Soviet-era weapons. Soldiers tell us they work well and do the job. But modern equipment would help push through the deadlock on the ground. On the other end isn't just the Russian military. There are also thousands of mercenaries from the private Wagner group. They expect incoming fire, so we retreat to a bunker.
Why does it feel like it's deadlocked on the ground?
It's stuck for many reasons. The winter makes it harder to use equipment. We also have a shortage of weapons and ammunition. 21-year-old Alexander replies. Back to positions they go. Each side trying to wear the other down. In this battle of endurance. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Bakhmut.
And Yogita was reporting there with her team, Imogen Anderson, Sanjay Ganguly and Mariana Matvichuk. Well, we can talk to Yogita, who is now in Kiev. Yogita, it's nearly a year since this conflict started. What hope is there of a resolution?
Well, as far as a dialogue is concerned, Rita, it seems almost impossible right now. Ukraine has proposed a peace summit in February, but it's said that Russia must face a war crimes tribunal before it talks to it directly. As far as Russia is concerned, it's said that Ukraine must give up regions that Moscow claims to have annexed. These are preconditions that neither side will accept. Militarily, what we've seen on the front lines there in Bakhmut is that there are very little advances being made by either side. But when we say that, it doesn't mean that it's not a deadly battle. Ukrainian and Russian soldiers are dying every day. And then there's the continuous bombardment of Ukrainian cities, which we witnessed not just there in Bakhmut, but also in the south, in the city of Kherson, where we were last week, where civilians are also dying every single day. In Bakhmut today, Ukrainian police say that 2 elderly women were killed because of shelling in the city.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent Yogita Limai there. The funeral of the former Pope, Benedict XVI, will take place tomorrow. His successor, Pope Francis, will preside over the service, and more than 60,000 people are expected to attend. Britain's most senior cleric at the Vatican has suggested to the BBC that Benedict's death could allow Pope Francis to think about stepping down. Our religion editor, Aleem Makboul, is at the Vatican for us now. Aleem.
Yes, well, St. Peter's Square down below me, Rita, all seems very calm, things very much set ahead of that funeral early tomorrow morning. And the Vatican tells us that over the past 3 days, as Benedict XVI was lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica, 195,000 people filed past to pay their respects. And there is just this sense that even though he stepped down back in 2013, in the passing of the Pope Emeritus, there might still yet be some change that's felt here at the Vatican going forward. In one part of the Vatican, Pope Francis was making an appearance in his weekly audience. He started by paying tribute to his predecessor, whose funeral he'll lead tomorrow. A very short distance away, thousands were taking their final opportunity to file past Benedict XVI lying in state. After his burial, for the first time in nearly a decade, there'll be only one pope in the Vatican. So what has having the former pope around been like for the current incumbent? We asked one of those closest to him.
It does have an effect. There's a presence there, which is undeniable. I don't think it's obstructed Pope Francis in any way. He's done and said and decided what he wanted to do. But it's a powerful presence of your predecessor. I think most of us have been in the situations where there's a bit of a shadow from our predecessor, and maybe people make comparisons and people say, well, we did it differently in the past.
In recent months, Pope Francis has struggled with mobility. There was speculation he was reluctant to consider resigning while Pope Benedict was around, and that he might now consider that option more freely.
If we had 3 popes, that would be, we have to say, a little bit difficult to manage, I would say. But now that Pope Benedict has gone to the Lord, I think that, yes, Pope Francis will stick to those principles that he's established, that he will continue in this ministry as long as he believes and sees that he is capable.
Pope Francis has always shown immense respect for his predecessor. In the morning, tens of thousands of people will pour into St. Peter's Square to join him in laying Benedict XVI to rest. Aleem Makboul, BBC News at the Vatican.
Here, there'll be more disruption to rail services tomorrow because of industrial action by train drivers. Members of the ASLEF union will go on strike, leaving large parts of England with no trains at all. It comes after the RMT union held its own 48-hour nationwide stoppage. Well, our transport correspondent Katie Austin is in Winchester for us. And Katie, the misery continues for passengers.
That's right. One strike day is drawing to a close, but another begins tomorrow when more than 12,000 train drivers in the ASLEV union are expected to walk out at 15 train companies. Those operators will be able to run either a very limited service or no trains at all. And there could be more strikes like this in the coming months without a breakthrough. The drivers' union ASLEV say that a pay rise is years overdue and that an offer still hasn't materialised from the train companies. The union's leader told me today that action could even be stepped up and will continue for as long as it takes. The rail delivery group, on the other hand, told me this evening that they think they are getting closer to being able to make an offer, but that pay rises, increases in pay have to come with reforms to fund it to make the railway more cost effective. What next then? Well, there's another RMT strike due to begin on Friday, and then on Monday we're expecting there will be meetings between the rail minister, the rail employers and unions to try and find a way forward here.
Katie, thank you. The Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, has advised against the privatisation of Channel 4 in a letter to the Prime Minister that has been leaked online. Ms Donnellan said there were better ways to ensure Channel 4's sustainability than privatisation, and that pursuing a sale of the broadcaster at this point was not the right decision. Her predecessor, Nadine Dorries, criticised the reversal. In the US, bitter splits within the Republican Party are being played out over the election of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a hugely powerful role which can make or break a president's agenda. After the Republicans became the majority party in the midterm elections in November, it was thought their existing leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, would assume the speakership. But he's lost a 6th vote after being blocked by hardline Conservatives. Our North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue is on Capitol Hill in Washington for us now. And Gary, where does all this go from here?
Well, 2 days, 6 votes, 9.5 hours, and they are still no closer reaching a conclusion than they were at the beginning of this whole process. The problem is there are around 20 rebels, Trumpian rebels on the right of Kevin McCarthy's party, who are implacably opposed to him, despite the numerous concessions he's given them over the last few days. Even with the intervention of Donald Trump himself, who urged his supporters to vote for Mr. McCarthy today, that made no difference whatsoever. They're breaking now for a couple of hours. They come back later this evening to try to do it all over again. Reeta, to mangle the words of one of Western philosophy's best-known thinkers, doing the same thing over and over again, well, it might not be the definition of idiocy when you expect a different outcome, but it is the definition of highly embarrassing.
Gary, thank you. Gary O'Donoghue. The author Faye Weldon, whose best-known works include The Life and Loves of a She-Devil, has died at the age of 91. The prolific writer published more than 30 novels during her career, as well as collections of short stories, films for television and pieces of journalism. Our arts correspondent Rebecca Jones looks back at her life.
Faye Weldon wrote playful, punchy tales in which women were exploited by men, though they often got their own back. In praxis, the pregnant heroine receives an awful warning from an older woman.
It's only the fear of pregnancy which keeps girls on the straight and narrow.
She was brought up in New Zealand. A portrait of Faye and her sister hangs in the country's National Gallery. She came to Britain at 15.
Now, nobody misunderstood this. We failed miserably.
She first made her name as an advertising copywriter. Go to work on an egg was one of hers. She later claimed her advertising success was down to luck. But life wasn't easy. A single mother in her early 20s, Faye Weldon then briefly married an older man who wouldn't sleep with her. After marrying again, she began writing TV plays and novels while she was pregnant. She wrote about class, the sexual revolution, and the supernatural.
You are clumsy.
I am not clumsy. It did it by itself.
You'd better keep that.
But it's your wedding ring.
Her best-known novel, The Life and Loves of a She-Devil, in which a woman takes revenge on her unfaithful husband, was adapted for television.
Let's go to bed.
It cemented her reputation as one of Britain's foremost feminist writers. Puffball, one of her best novels, later became a film. Yet as she got older, her views of women's roles shifted.
It wasn't just feminism that changed things. It was technology. It was birth control. It was all kinds of other factors. I mean, sometimes I think feminism was just a sort of cloak under which capitalism sort of crept up on us all and turned us into a consumer society and made us all go out to work and exhausted us.
Later in life, she urged women to pick up their husbands' socks. Some feminists accused her of betrayal. She felt her job was done. What drove me to feminism 50 years ago, she wrote, was the myth that men were the breadwinners and women kept house and looked pretty. That myth finally exploded, and I helped to explode it.
Faye Weldon, who's died at the age of 91. Let's take a look at the weather now. Here's Chris Fawkes with a pot of gold, perhaps?
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
But there we had a nice rainbow earlier on today. Do you know, the other feature of the weather is very, very mild today. Indeed, central London, we had temperatures of 14 degrees Celsius. The average at this time of the year is about 7. Now, looking at the weather picture over the next few days, despite the fact there wasn't that much rain, we still had 24 flood warnings in force, most of them across southern England, and that's a sign that the ground remains completely saturated. Out west, meanwhile, this area of cloud is going to develop into an area of low pressure, bringing wet and windy weather late tomorrow. And then this area of cloud just off the coast of Canada, that's going to be bringing some heavy rain for Friday. Could see some localised flooding Friday night, and then into the weekend it stays unsettled. Now, tonight it's a largely dry night, only showers across northern England slowly fading away. Touch of frost possible in northern Scotland, but otherwise very mild, 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. That's how we start the day tomorrow. Decent start with some sunshine across much of Scotland and England, but out west the cloud will thicken up quite quickly. A few patches of rain across England and Wales, but not really amounting to too much. Whereas for Northern Ireland and Scotland, it turns wet and windy here through the afternoon. All the while, the southwesterly winds bringing mild air, so temperatures about 11 to 14 degrees. Then gets very windy tomorrow night with gales, maybe even severe gales across the far northwest of the country as a band of rain sweeps through, followed by these showers. Friday, a blustery day in Scotland with the showers rattling through on those strong winds. Further southwards, though, I think a brighter, sunnier kind of day for most of you. And in the sunshine, with the winds still coming up from the southwest. Again, it's mild with temperatures widely staying into double figures across England and Wales, 8s and 9s for Scotland and for Northern Ireland. Now, this band of rain is from that area of low pressure that I showed you a moment ago that's currently near Canada. Well, that brings a band of rain through. Could see some localised surface water flooding from that. And then as that moves through, by the time we get to the weekend, the weather turns more showery in nature, but those showers are going to be heavy, quite blustery, and temperatures coming down a little bit closer to normal for the time of year across the north, but otherwise it's staying pretty mild. Rita.
Chris, thank you very much. And that is tonight's BBC News at 10. There's more analysis of the day's main stories on Newsnight. That's with Faisal Islam, just getting underway on BBC Two right now. The news continues here on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. From the 10 o'clock team, it's good night.